what are they to do in the churches? They're supposed to come against false doctrine. And in Titus, and by the way, Titus and 1 Timothy were written about the same time. In fact, the similarities between Titus and 1 Timothy are stunning. And you can see like when you look at Ephesians, right, and Colossians, when Paul wrote both those letters probably from the same prison cell around the same time. And he's having similar problems in Crete, similar false doctrines being taught. And you know what he tells Titus? Yeah, you're supposed to correct and refute the false doctrines. But listen to what he says. What if people persist in teaching false doctrine at a church? How do we apply that in our own fellowship? But avoid foolish controversies and genealogies. Brothers and sisters, do not divide over foolish controversies, things that are not important, you know. Well, is the second coming of Christ important? Yeah, that's important. Is our salvation important? Yeah, that's important, right? Is the Bible being the Word of God or not important? Yes, that's important. Is a virgin birth important? Yes, that's important. Is salvation by grace through faith important? Yeah, that's important, right? Is pneumatology, the fact that, we need to be born of the Spirit important? Yes, that's important. The Trinity important? Yeah, that's important. But foolish controversies and genealogies, arguing about genealogies and strife and disputes about the law. Because these folks, as you're going to see, and if we continued reading 1 Timothy beyond verse 3, into verses 6, 7, 8, and 9, you'll see that these wannabe teachers, and they were already teachers at Ephesus, were twisting the law, Paul says. And they're misusing the law. Like those in Galatia, trying to make people think they had to keep the Old Testament law to be saved. But I'm running ahead now. I'm trying to give you a little bit of the nature of those false teachings, though. Then you know what he says? Verse 10, reject a heretical man or a divisive man or a factious man after a first and second warning. Paul tells Timothy, those elders who continue to sin, rebuke them before all. He says, in Titus, he says, reject a factious man after a first and second warning, knowing that such a man is perverted and is sinning, being self-condemned. So if a teacher in the church starts teaching things contrary to the Word of God, it's important, it's vital that he's confronted. And if he continues to teach it, then you warn him again. And if he still refuses, just like in Matthew 18, Jesus says, go to him privately, right? When you're confronting someone to sin, if they refuse, go to them again, right? But then bring it before the church and consider him a heathen and a tax gatherer. After the second warning, if the person still won't listen, well, then why are you even here, Why are you even here if you're teaching contrary to what the church has historically believed? Now, it's interesting. Look at what Paul says in verse 3. As I urge you upon my departure from Macedonia, remain on at Ephesus so that you may what? Instruct certain men not to teach strange doctrines. That word right there, anybody have a translation that says command certain men? Okay, because that Greek word right there is paragelo, okay? And paragelo is a word that's translated command elsewhere. And it means command. It's a word of authority. It's used by generals who command when they command their troops. It's used by judges who command somebody to come to court, a summons, And Paul is basically telling Timothy, you need to go before the church and command these false teachers to stop teaching their heresies.